The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, America. Good morning, world. Good morning, CHD. Welcome once again. My name is Michael Kane. I'm the Director of Advocacy here at Children's Health Defense. Today, we have a bunch of stuff. The headline is a second chance for the COVID vaccine injured. Attorney Ray Flores just doing remarkable work. We are going to be getting into that. And then after I talk to Ray at the top of the show here, Epstein, Power and Influence, Dr. Meryl Nass will be talking to Johnny Vedmore. So make sure you stay for the whole thing. Now, a second chance for the COVID vaccine injured is a big part of what we're going to talk about. But first, because this really just kind of broke over the weekend, a piece of it. There's an executive order everybody knows that came from the Trump administration that was on August 10th. Part of it gives a revised task force 90 days to produce a vaccine safety report. This is directly a result of a lawsuit initiated by Ray Flores over a year ago. And now HHS and the president are asking for comments from you in regards to the new proposed vaccine schedule, religious exemptions, medical exemptions, all of these things that are coming up. But let's bring Ray on so that we can talk about this. Ray, thanks so much for joining us this morning. How are you doing?
Oh, man, I'm doing great, Michael. Thank you so much for having me.
A lot of great news breaking, a lot of it coming from your work directly. So talk to us about the executive order, where it's at right now, and this new announcement that HHS wants comments from the public about what is being proposed in the executive order.
Yes, well, last year when I sued Secretary Kennedy in his official capacity, Flores v. Kennedy, I forced HHS's hand to reestablish the Task Force on Safer Childhood Vaccines. That meant that 2 years down the road, the task force would then report to Congress the improvements that it had made in manufacturing, processing, testing, labeling, warning use, instructions, distribution, storage, field surveillance, adverse reaction reporting, recall or reactogenic lots to reduce the risk of adverse reactions to vaccines. But the thing is, it was really just going to kind of stay below the radar for a year. What Trump's executive order did was he accelerated their activity requirement by having them report directly to the president within 90 days. So this was an unexpected bonus to what it is that I had done a year ago.
So in your lawsuit from over a year ago, which actually I remember I had you on this show, we broke that news back then. It went wild, actually. It went crazy viral at that time. And it seemed to have immediate impact and change. Tell us some of the details of that lawsuit. How far did that lawsuit have to go? Was there some point where you were able to drop the case? I don't know all of the details. Talk to us about the timeline from when it went out and then what HHS did back then and where your lawsuit stands now, if it exists at all right now.
Yes, well, last year at around St. Patrick's Day, I sent a 60-day demand for the secretary to form the task force. It was ignored. I filed suit. They asked for an extension, a 2-week extension before they had to respond to the lawsuit. And they said that we want to discuss how we're going to make you happy. What would it take? And if so, then would you drop the lawsuit? So the day before their responsive pleading was due, they established the task force, and I, as promised, withdrew the lawsuit. I got what I wanted.
So once that task force was created at that time, not around a year ago, or not quite a year ago when it was created, they then had 2 years to report to, I believe, to Congress, I believe is what the statute says.
Right.
But as you just said, President Trump just sped that up with this executive order. And now we are looking at 90 days, which falls somewhere in November, I believe, that we finally get this first report. Ray, I think we were supposed to get dozens of these reports over the past 30 years or so. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, there'd never been a report to Congress by the secretary. Uh, that means since the 86 Act was established, I believe the first report would have come due in 1990. So for 36 years, there's never been a single report, and the report won't come out until sometime before August of 2027. So it's literally, what, 39 years after the 86 Act require the report as part of the give and take, the quid pro quo of the 86 Act. And yet they never did it. They never did it.
Wow, it's really truly remarkable. So, I just have one clarifying question on this. So, Trump has ordered a report in 90 days in regards to all of this information, but from what you just said, in August of 2027, I'm assuming it won't be the final report that we get in the 90 days. Does that sound right?
Well, it's just a report to the president rather than a report to Congress. And the what I had specified they had to report on with those improvements is different than what it is that the president is asking for now, but it's all relating to activating the task force. And then what's even more exciting is that just on Friday, HHS announced that they want public participation to assist the task force in their assessment of vaccines.
Yeah, that is very exciting. So everybody needs to comment on that now. It covers all of the vaccine safety issues. You can comment on that. You can comment on the childhood schedule, the reduction recommendations in the childhood schedule, aligning to the other similarly situated Western nations and their proven schedules. And also, and of interest to many people in our audience, you could comment on religious and medical exemptions and parental rights, because that was also added into this executive order as well, too, where President Trump says there should be maximal parental rights and involvement when it comes to vaccination of children. So you see the short URL, children'shd.org/HHSRFI. The link will be in the show notes below. Click on that, spread that, and give your comments. You can comment up until, where's my note here? September 20th. September 20th. So we want tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of comments to go. This information will be done by the 20th, prepared shortly after that into October. Look at that. Right before the midterm elections, the public is getting to comment on this executive order. So please make sure that you go and do that. Okay, Ray, very, very exciting stuff. Kudos to you having kicked that off. I remember over a year ago, even behind the scenes, you talking about this and what you were doing. Truly, truly a remarkable outcome here. Now, similarly, what we had our headline for the show today is that your work is also now helping to lead to a publication of a COVID vaccine injury table. Those who have been injured by the COVID vaccine now will have a second bite at the apple to apply for damages. And actually, it's not only the COVID vaccines, it's all COVID era countermeasures. Please talk to us about this action that you took and what just recently happened.
Yes, well, similar to the task force, which was a non-discretionary duty for the HHS secretary, there is another one under the PrEP Act that requires the secretary to publish the countermeasures injury table, and no secretary had done so up until this point. And by the time that the table is published, Secretary Kennedy will have been in office 2 years before it's published. So whether it's the handlers or whatever the reluctance was for him to have published it right out of the gate. Now this lawsuit is forcing their hand, so to speak, to have them establish this table. The beauty of the table is that all the different injuries from these countermeasures will have to be spelled out along with a timetable, a countermeasures injury table similar to what we have in vaccine court. And the beauty of it is that if there is an injury that starts within a certain specified time period, causation is presumed. And so that means that anybody who had, a heart attack within a week or whatever the date is going to be on the proposed table, and then on the final table, those people will have they'll be able to reapply. And that's the even bigger benefit of this is, more people are going to be compensated according to the proposed rule if the injuries are presumed and within the time period of the table. But then even more exciting, the most exciting part is that everybody who is now newly eligible, including those people who had been denied before, will now have another year to apply to CSIP for compensation.
So I have a couple of questions. One, you had just brought up as an example, if somebody had a heart attack within the first week or two of having the COVID shot, it would be presumed, but that the COVID shot caused that injury. But we don't know currently if heart attacks will be on the injury table or not, right? That's the process that they're going to go through. And first off, am I correct about that?
Yes, what's going to happen is come sometime in November, they're going to publish the proposed rule, which will have the proposed timelines and injuries. And then once again, the public has a chance to, make their voices heard on what the injury should be, what the timetable should be, and what it is that they missed. So that when the final rule comes out, hopefully the HHS will have considered everyone's comments. I would hope that we have hundreds of thousands of comments from people on
Right.
this.
So just like how we just talked about before with the executive order, setting up getting a task force moving, and they have a public comment period on that one. Same one with this, but we don't have that currently available. It should be in November, where there will be a comment period where those can go and comment and put what injury they got, what happened to them, and get all of that information so that it is included and assessed by the Secretary and HHS as they create the injury table. When do you then, so that would probably be a month or so of comments, when do you then think the injury table would be likely or possibly published after that?
Well, the comment period is scheduled to close sometime in January. So it'll be over 30 days and possibly all the way up to 60 days. And they could extend the comment period time. And then after that, once they've considered everything, then they'll go ahead and issue the final rule. But sometimes it can take longer than that. But I'm hopeful that they're looking to have this thing, before March of 2027, which is going to be really exciting. And then we'll announce to everybody once again, now's the time to apply.
So anybody who is injured or thinks they were injured by a COVID shot, whether or not they applied in the past, whether or not, does it matter whether they applied and were denied previously? If they've missed the window, does this open it for absolutely everybody, or are there any caveats or carve-outs to that?
There are no carve-outs and there are no caveats. All it needs to be is an injury that had its onset within the specified time period in the table.
Right. So anybody who suspects that they were injured by a COVID shot, you should now take advantage of this opening window for you to register for potential compensation for an injury that has been caused to you. Ray, what have they been doing with no injury table up until now, because there's been injuries since 2021. So when people apply at the CICP, and we should explain that a little bit, that's the Countermeasures Court. That is a separate court from the vaccine court, which is even more difficult to have a victory in. Up until today, when you have these poor COVID vaccine injured victims applying, what have they been doing to determine whether or not they should get compensation if there isn't even an injury table currently for some 5 years?
Yes, well, first of all, it's an application process, not a court. And then, second of all, every injury is considered an off-table injury, meaning that you have to be the one who explains and proves why the injury was caused by the COVID vaccine. And of course, they'll never admit it. The other beauty of the injury table is that anybody who was trying to apply for workers' comp, for example, couldn't get a workers' comp attorney to represent them because, vaccines don't cause injuries. Now all of a sudden they'll have this table. They can go to their doctor. They won't be gaslit and say, look, see, here it is. I got this after I had the COVID shot a week after. So don't tell me anymore that it wasn't the shot that did it. So, this is remarkable news. I can't tell you, look, out of the 6 million people who have VAERS reported COVID-19 vaccine injuries, 150,000 or so were serious physical injuries, which is what is covered by CSIP. And there's only been 14,000 people who applied to CSIP. So assuming that VAERS is underreporting, there could be, a minimum of 100,000 new applications and maybe somewhere up to 1.5 million new applications for the CSIP program. I mean, hopefully this will convince those no good so-and-sos not to do this to the people anymore.
So that's really interesting. You had said that earlier, that the benefit of getting the injury table is once the injury table is set, if your injury matches that, causation is assumed. And currently in CSIP, what they're doing is saying, well, we can't assume any causation. You have to prove it. And that has led to almost all of COVID applications in CSIP being denied. There's been a very, very small amount up until this point that have been accepted. And most of the compensation rates have been very, very low as well, too. So this is a remarkable point. And I got to say, if they get, forget 1 million. If they get 100,000 applications, there's going to be a record skip in Big Pharma and HHS. Everyone's going to go, whoa, 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 whoa. It's going to force a reevaluation of the entirety of the system, especially as it relates to the COVID shot. But what I also want to say is, before we got on, Ray, you said this also doesn't just apply to COVID vaccine injury, but applies to all COVID era injury. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, COVID countermeasures.
Please explain that. Please explain that to everybody.
That would be remdesivir, which everybody complains about. Nobody gets to do anything about. That would be ventilators, and any other COVID countermeasure that was used to prevent COVID. I think that this opens the door for people who were, whose family members were killed by remdesivir. Now all of a sudden they get to apply. And the people who were killed death by ventilator, they'll get to apply. So, this thing is massive.
That's really important. I actually didn't realize that. We need to get the word out on that too. If your family member was killed because they were ventilated, because they were put on remdesivir, because of both of those things happened, you now have a 1-year window period to apply for compensation through the CICP program as well too. So great work, Ray. Fascinating, horrifying. It's all of it. It has all of it. But we need to keep doing this. We need good attorneys like you who are moving the needle forward. Before I let you go, last week you were here on CHD TV as well too, talking about another petition that you were filing with the federal government related to Tylenol over the counter. There is a ton of information showing that Tylenol given to infants, given to babies, is related and is connected to autism. Talk to us. Give our audience who might have not have heard about this. Give them a little bit of background about what this was, how this was filed, and such as well too, and what we need people to do with this one.
Yes, Dr. Brian Hooker had asked me a few months ago to do something about Tylenol, and I was in Arizona at a CHD event, and I got to get to know Dr. William Parker, who's the foremost expert on Tylenol, and he's the one who just wrote the book that CHD published on Tylenol and autism. What I found was that Tylenol for infants does not have a recommended dosage. It says ask a physician. Well, how can you buy a dangerous product for your infant that has no dosage? And so the FDA has the power to remove the OTC monograph, in other words, the over-the-counter status for products that are unsafe. And so I found the hook, so to speak, on why they should remove it and make it prescription only. I mean, if you got to ask a physician anyway, why don't you ask them ahead of time? I mean, what's wrong with these people? And then the other thing too is that, for obstetricians during delivery, and also for children's Tylenol for children under 6, I've asked for a boxed warning, which is a warning that they put on the product that says, do not use during delivery and do not, use, for children under 6, it may cause autism. So think about it before you take it.
Ray, I want to talk about a little controversy around some of this work that has led to many in our, a faction in our movement, many who we know and respect and are friends with, to say, this is ridiculous. Tylenol does not cause autism. This entire line of research is incorrect. Could you just speak a little bit to that sentiment and that concern that has come up regarding this research?
Yeah, well, I put 3 months into putting this petition together, and there's another 3,000 pages of supporting evidence and studies that are linked in the citizen petition on the regulations.gov website. So, I mean, Dr. Parker, to me, is a living genius. He's the one who discovered what the appendix actually does. He figured that out himself. So we're not talking about some lightweight. Now, as far as any kind of factions or, any disbelief on behalf of our people, CHD, I believe, has the proper position that this is dangerous for children. Even the president said, "Don't give Tylenol to children." Right? It came out, and it's also referenced in the petition to be careful with this. So, obviously, vaccines are a cause, and CHD is not backing away from that position, but that now we have strong evidence filed with the government for everybody to review of how dangerous Tylenol is for children and why.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I don't think, I know CHD is not saying that acetaminophen, Tylenol is the sole causative, issue behind autism. No, 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 not at all. But I mean, Ray, you've probably heard this. I've heard this so many times with multiple vaccines, but in particular, MMR vaccine. Child is ill, major fever. Call the pediatrician. They say, give them Tylenol. They give them Tylenol. The child is never the same again. And so a lot of times we're talking about a series of known toxins that are impacting the child one after the next, let alone Hep B at birth, let alone, the first year of the child's schedule. And and there's no exact formula to this. We just know, as in another recent book from Children's Health Defense, the total load of toxicity that is building up. There's a point where you break through the threshold, and all types of neurological and illness happens to children, happens to babies. So CHD is not changing any of those positions. We're just responding to the science as we see it. And it does appear acetaminophen is one of the problems here. Ray Flores, anything else that you want to direct everybody? Oh, actually, before, let's please put up where you can comment regarding the Tylenol and requesting that it go to OTC, over the counter, children'sHD.org/FDA Tylenol. That link will be in the show notes as well, too. We got a lot of work for our audience today. Please do it. Please do it. Like, you're home, you're watching, you're taking this stuff in, right? Here I am hosting Ray's, staying up all night long, writing petitions and lawsuits and stuff. Your job is to do this. Just do these things, right? You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to do what Ray does or I do or Dr. Meryl Nass or Mary Holland. Just when we ask you to take action, please take these actions. It means so much when we see hundreds of comments go to thousands, go to tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands. You can make that happen. Ray. Oh, I'm sorry.
Good times, Michael.
I'm sorry. I thought I cut you off. I thought I heard your voice.
No, just good times, man. It's great to be here. This is a victory lap for sure, and we're right in the middle of the fight now. We got to really start slugging. We got them against the ropes, and now we got to pummel them.
And one last thing I want to say before I go to Dr. Nass here, is that this executive order was the first one for our issues that wasn't released on a Friday after 5 p.m. Do you know what they do at Friday after 5 p.m.? They bury stuff. They throw us a bone, and they say, okay, medical freedom movement, go away. We did something. No, this was a Monday on 3 p.m. with Heidi Overton next to Bobby Kennedy. That's Susie Wiles number 2 during the election season. This is a totally, and listen, it doesn't mean everything's perfect, and it doesn't mean we got everything, but we are in a much different space, and we are largely in the driver's seat on a lot of these issues. Ray Flores, keep up the amazing work. Great work, my brother. Great work.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks so much. All right, don't go anywhere. Now I want to turn it over to the legendary Dr. Meryl Nass, who will be interviewing Johnny Vedmore. Let's go to Meryl.
Good morning. I'm back again with Johnny Vedmore to talk about the life of Jeffrey Epstein. And let me remind you, the sex crimes that this man committed and helped happen with other people is only the very tiniest part of his importance, but it has been used to basically deflect and cover up what this man was really about. Johnny and I spoke a month ago for about 40 minutes about Jeffrey, but I want to go back now to Jeffrey's early life and figure out how did he get to the position that he was in? Why was he protected at the highest levels? In many ways, we're still not even 100% sure that he's dead. We think he's dead. He couldn't possibly have killed himself with a paper sheet. And he was involved in trying to change and develop a new financial system, new ways of investing, and everything he did had a narrative, and then it had the real reason he was doing it. So let me bring on Johnny and let him start by talking about Jeffrey Epstein as a child and a young man. How did he wind up where he finally became at the pinnacle of basically a CIA type operative, probably for several different countries' intelligence agencies, who was too big to fail, who was protected until the very end when he was either murdered or shipped out of the prison. So tell us his story from the beginning, please.
Meryl, it's fantastic to be back talking to you. And you started me off on something. You're responsible for me finding a little bit more information that we probably should have included in One Nation Under Blackmail, because when we were speaking last time, you said, just before you messaged me and you said, I'd love to talk about his early life, and I said, I didn't tackle so much his early life. I tackled these areas, and it'd always been something on my mind. Well, his schooling is something that I really wanted to go into in detail, but I always had to put it on the back burner. I'd always learned other things, and he was so important later on in schooling leadership programs, in technocracy, in edge, etc., that it seemed that could be key to understanding who Jeffrey Epstein was. And I went back and thought, okay, I'll go through some of the records now that I don't feel confident in that part of his life. I'll go back through some of the records. And first of all, I looked at the Dalton School, which was one of the things which I really hadn't paid much attention to. Whitney had looked into a lot of that when we were researching One Nation Under Blackmail, so I hadn't really been focused on it. But I discovered that there was something that was an extra piece of information, because we know that Donald Barr was the headmaster at the Dalton School up until about June, July of 1974, when Epstein is officially being admitted to the school as a teacher, so being brought on as a teacher. So it's thought that that is the employment process. Donald Barr would have had to be central to that. So that makes him very important, of course.
Let me just interrupt. Jeffrey was 21 years old and a college dropout at that time.
Yes. So there was a lot of questions, and there's a lot of questions about the actual head teachers and the structure at Dalton during this point, because in One Nation Under Blackmail, it states that Peter Branch took over as headmaster. But he was actually, when you said I'd like to speak about his early years, I went back and I did some more research, and I discovered that Peter Branch was actually only the interim headmaster during that period. He only was headmaster for about 3 months, 4 months. December time, they employed a new headmaster, and it was a guy called Gardner P. Dunnan. And this was the first time I've come across this name or this information, because when it went down in One Nation Under Blackmail, we thought Peter Branch was the headmaster, but it turns out Gardner P. Dunnan was appointed headmaster, and he's very interesting because in 2018, as courthousenews.com will tell you, there was actually a complaint filed against him about abuse at that school, and he was alleged of offering a 14-year-old tuition-free admission, and he was accused of doing certain things that were seen as abuse. So I don't know how that court case developed, but it's very interesting that he is like that. That was something that he hasn't been focused in on or looked at yet. That was a very interesting part of his early youth, and obviously. For Jeffrey Epstein, the Dalton School must have been some sort of training ground. It was a place for him to go, and he was to be trained in some way for the future, because very soon after, when he actually entered into business, he really obviously clearly had a trajectory that went to working with the CIA during the early 80s, for sure. But he went from Dalton School to Bear Stearns to International Assets Group. And so there's this early rise where it's obviously financing black operations. Of course, I've discussed on the last show we did, I discussed a little bit about Iran-Contra and how he was involved in Iran-Contra.
But let me interrupt you. So Dalton School is one of the top private schools in New York City where the rich and famous send their children. So you don't hire college dropouts to teach there, and you don't hire guys who are hitting on the high school girls. So those were two reasons he should not have been there. So I would suggest he was placed there. So even by the age of 21, he was already somehow working for somebody who was moving him as a piece on the chessboard.
Totally. And what you say about hitting on college girls as well is really
High school
important
girls.
because high school girls. Sorry,
Yes.
we
Yeah, in
term
England
college
they
and
might
high
be in
school differently.
college.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he was Jeffrey Epstein wasn't just a rumored here and there. He was proactively going to parties where it was mainly youngsters who felt uncomfortable about him being around. So that is a reoccurring theme. But we're not going to know, there is going to be a certain element of darkness about this period because we can presume and suspect that he's been placed into that position and then he's risen to prominence through the agency. And he's obviously been, and there's a lot of people who are working within banking industry in the late 70s and early 80s because of banking reforms. Something that Stanley Pottinger, who I talked about in the Iran-Contra part of the episode, was involved in. The Banking Secrecy Act came in 1970, and that basically meant that everything had to be, all of these paper documents had to be digitalized in some way, and that was going to cause issues for banks because there was a lot of hidden money, and so there was a lot of jiggery-pokery, you could say, involved in that process. Most banks didn't actually adhere to the Banking Secrecy Act until about 1976, when there was pressure put on with other laws. And then people like Stanley Pottinger, Jeffrey Epstein, others are able to enter into a banking industry which is primed for them to basically take advantage of. They're looking to in a sense, they've got a reset. This is a moment where the CIA and other agencies, if they have to be running black operations money, black ops money, then they need to do that in secrecy. This is the best time for them to get the system under check while it's being created and reformed into a new system. So you see a lot of people go into banking at this time. And I think that's partially why.
So Jeffrey Epstein is at the Dalton School for just a few years and then goes to work at Bear Stearns, which is being run by the father of one of the students at Dalton. So he's still in his mid-20s, and suddenly he gets a good job at Bear Stearns. And within a few years, I don't even think he's 30 yet, he becomes a partner there. Now, how does that happen?
It happens quite a lot when you're dealing out the back doors. I mean, that the trajectory is incredible, and it is by 87, 88, people are getting people who are in these elite circles are starting to be a bit perturbed by the fact that there's this youngster hanging around who seems to have his finger in all the pies and have the Rothschild ear. That the ear of the Rothschild family was one of the main issues that some other people had about him, and his closeness with these circles. Joe Lieberman was in this circle. Of course, Leslie Wexner was in this circle. Robert Maxwell was in this circle. These were the top elites by this point. How he got into that top elite, we like to think, or we assume that there has to be some sort of hegemony attached to that. There has to be some sort of family dynamic to that he must be someone, he must be related to someone, attached to someone. But I'm not sure that's true. I think it's hard for people to admit that Jeffrey Epstein may have been a genius, one of those dropout geniuses that's able to manage things that other people cannot manage.
Yeah. So, okay. So he's at Bear Stearns now in his 20s, and he gets hooked up with Adnan Khashoggi. Khashoggi is said to be the world's #1 arms trafficker. And it wasn't only arms, he trafficked in people and diamonds and other things. But also said at one time in the 80s to be the world's richest man, Adnan Khashoggi. Remember, it was his nephew who was killed and cut up and dissolved for the current MBS, the current head of Saudi Arabia, when he was writing articles about Saudi Arabia for the Washington Post a few years ago. Let me also remind people that Joe Lieberman was a senator from Connecticut, a warmongering senator, a Jewish senator at that time. I wonder how he was in Epstein's circle. How did that work?
Epstein. I think that there was a certain Epstein was heading towards something else. He was hanging around in the same circles as George H.W. Bush, and they were looking towards Bush's time in office, his term as president. I think they were already planning that very early on. I think we know in the 1980s that there was, there's some people might have expected Bush to have actually taken over from a dead president.
Right. So let me go back. 1975, George Herbert Walker Bush was appointed the head of the CIA. He only kept that position for about a year, but then he became Ronald Reagan's running mate and became the vice president. Nixon had sent him off for a while. Nixon saw him as a threat, as a competitor, and it sent him off to, I believe, be the ambassador to Japan for several years in the early 70s. But he'd climbed back, and in a way, George Bush is similar to Epstein in that he had a lot of private, unsavory dealings that made him a lot of money.
There is one I'd like to bring up. 1976. George H.W. Bush is the head of the CIA. The Chilean dictator Pinochet has been installed by the CIA a few years previous and is very angry at Orlando Letelier, who used to be a foreign minister for and a couple other different positions for Allende in Chile. There is, of course, the assassination of Orlando Letelier outside on Embassy Row in Washington, D.C., shocking. Even the CIA.
Johnny, we have to contextualize this for your audience. So what happened was that Allende was the elected prime minister or president of Chile, and he was a leftist, and I don't know if it was United Fruit or the industries that were in Chile did not like him, tried to get rid of him in a bunch of different ways, and finally, with violence, supported Augusto Pinochet, who was a general in the army who had a coup, and Allende was killed. And then Chile had many years of very strict military dictatorship. A lot of people disappeared. A lot of people were tortured and murdered. And during this time, after Pinochet had become the head of Chile, he wanted to get rid of Orlando Letelier, who was living in the United States, but had been a high official in the Chilean government, and had him bombed in Washington, D.C. in broad daylight with his American assistant, Ronni, somebody. And so the two of them were murdered in D.C. Now, Pinochet was widely hated by Democrats around the world, and eventually, when he was very old, was brought to some sort of trial or some sort of legal. He had to face some sort of legal problem, but he ruled Argentina with an iron hand for a long time.
Yes.
Okay, so Letelier and Ronnie Moffitt were murdered.
They were murdered because they were caught up in Operation Condor, which was a very clever South American and Latin American multinational intelligence operation, where basically different members of different nation states in South America took sanctions up to murder of opponents on behalf of other countries that were part of Operation Condor. So it was countries, multinational countries, and instead of Chilean people going out to kill a Chilean in America and it leading back to Chile directly, there would be a couple of other countries involved who would do the actual sanctioning. And then when it did happen, it was a shock, but the CIA went straight into action, because both they had to play down the actual fact that there had been an assassination on American soil, committed by a supposed ally as well, on a man who wasn't that detrimental to the well-being of Chile. It was seriously for ego, in large part. And it was a really important moment. And Eugene Proper was put in charge of the case by the State Department. And suddenly, J. Stanley Pottinger turned up and said, hey, can I help you? I have a friend. His name is George H.W. Bush, and he just happens to be the head of the CIA. You come with me, and we can meet with him, and we can see how we can best help you investigate. So Eugene Proper and comes back with Stanley Pottinger to the CIA. They meet with George H.W. Bush, and George H.W. Bush says, hey, I can find out what happened to Orlando Letelier if you sign this anti-constitutional right for us to surveil domestically. So it's against the CIA constitution to actually surveil domestically and act domestically. And if Eugene Proper could and Stanley Pottinger could sign off this with the president as emergency action, then the CIA could help. And that's what happened. Stanley Pottinger went to the White House, got the signature, came back, and a lot of that was George H.W. Bush setting up for his time in politics. That was him stepping into a political realm, and he was prepping it. He was making sure the power dynamic and intelligence and politics were inextricably linked to an extent, and that they were in bed together, and that the CIA compromised politics. That's one of the main things. I mean, I think George H.W. Bush might be one of the central creators of the modern way compromise was used, at least modern from 1970s onwards.
How does this relate to Jeffrey Epstein?
Well, of course, J. Stanley Pottinger relates to Jeffrey Epstein in multiple ways, because he shared soon after, in 1980 to 1984, was sharing office with Jeffrey Epstein, something he admitted to his business partner, Bradley Edwards, and was in the book Relentless Pursuit. Right. And he also, that office was during the same time that these guys...
Why did you bring up the Letelier assassination, Johnny?
We gotta go back. It's about the distribution of power and what George H.W. Bush was preparing. So George H.W. Bush prepared the way for this new world to be created, where politics and intelligence was inextricably linked, and that gave rise to new people like Epstein. So suddenly, what seemed sudden to other people in the late 80s, these people who had cut their teeth during Iran-Contra and during operations like that, and had been brought into this new political intelligence realm, were suddenly hoisted into the same circles as the rich and the wealthy, and this is where intelligence took over corporate power completely. I'd think, or at least it's always been linked.
Okay, no, so that's interesting. So you're saying that basically intelligence decided to infiltrate high society.
And for that, you needed leadership programs. So they decided they were going to start with the leadership programs. And Joe Lieberman being or hanging around with these people, he wasn't the only one. A lot of the people who would be rising up in the Democratic Party would already be starting to link with these people, hanging around to the same parties. They were warned. I think it was I can't remember if it was Robert Mercer or someone else who warned Joe Lieberman and others, stay away from this Jeffrey Epstein character. He's very suspicious and he doesn't make any sense. Some people could sense straight away what these people did was something else. And soon, Joe Lieberman and others became closely associated with Epstein's circles. And the people who were getting on the planes, on the Lolita Express, and were meeting with with Epstein were people like Joe Lieberman, RFK Jr., many others Bill Richardson, many others who had the potential of getting, especially into office in Democrat leadership positions, and were potentially the leaders of the future. They were kind of being groomed through this new process, and this was what George H.W. Bush was preparing. He was preparing someone like Epstein during the 80s, someone like Epstein, to take over the training, or part of the aspect of training, the leadership group that will be installed into power under choice architecture.
Yes, so they saw that Epstein had these personality characteristics, that he was charismatic, that he could convince people of things, and they saw him as someone who could help train the next generation of leaders who were attached to intelligence and could be controlled. Is that correct?
Yes, and he was very, 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 very successful at it all through the early 90s and the mid 90s. And by the late 90s, he was on to the next generation of technocratic leaders. And that's where the Reality Club, John Brockman and Edge come in, because they had already, the agency had already put, when they see technology coming in the future, they put their feelers out, they put their guys out, they create the institutions early, and they leave them evolve naturally with a controlled elite at the top, or at the core. And the Reality Club in the 80s, which is what John Brockman initially made and would turn into the Edge Foundation, that was really to get understanding that the technocratic scientific elite of the future are the ones who are going to have control and power. The power is going to shift to the technology and to the technocrats. And in knowing that, they're already saying, well, we need to start working on that early. And they did a really good job of that. By the time it was the late 90s, Epstein had already cut his teeth in managing the Democratic leadership candidates alongside Clinton, because Clinton and him were just CIA guys who were running the Democrat Party. Yes, Clinton may be actually a president or whatever, but that he was just managing it alongside Epstein, the leadership, making sure they had everybody in place, and they were doing a really bad job of it. I mean, the leaders that come out of it are awful, but it didn't really matter to them, because they know that in 20 years' time, the technocrats are going to be the ones who have all of the power, and they know that in 20 years after that, they will have compromised the technocrats so much that they will be inextricably linked to the CIA.
Yes, it's interesting that Bill Clinton had the same sort of sexual escapades as Epstein, perhaps not with.
I think a lot more that we haven't heard of.
Yeah. Okay, so now who was John Brockman, and how was he related to Epstein?
A really interesting guy who grew up in New York, and he was from a Jewish family, but they were all very, I mean, he was inspired. He was an Imagineer. He was in Disney terms. He really did really did like the idea of imagination. Some people, John Cage had a big effect on him, and some other people had a big effect on him, and eventually he claimed that he was just interested in science, and he was hanging around with all of the elite scientists very early on, and he was meeting all of these guys, and it just seems to manifest into him being centrally part of a group and easy enough to compromise or get on board. You don't have to compromise people. Most of these people want to do what they're doing anyway. So John Brockman, I would assume that very early on he was part of the CIA crowd, the clique, the elite, the Gloria Steinems and stuff, who were hanging around, enjoying themselves in the 60s and 70s, and then they were put to work in the 80s, and they needed to, later on, when you've done your time, you know how to do business, you know how to be productive, then the world is your oyster. And they've gone out and he created something called the Reality Club. What it was going to be was like a little club of elite scientists who understand what the future looked like. It included Daniel Dennett, Isaac Asimov, it included Richard Dawkins and a few others. And they would meet up in a little cafe in or a bar in New York, and they would have their little meetings as a reality club. And it grew and it grew, and of course the wives would come along, and soon this core, like the visionaries of the technocrats, it really attracted the youth who were going to be the technocratic elite, who were going to be able to be put into positions, and they started hanging around in the same areas too. And by the 90s, you've got Jeff Bezos and others who are coming out of D.E. Shaw in the mid-90s, and they're hanging around in the same groups and the same elites, and they soon start going to the reality club. And that, at that point, when there's definable technocratic elite, there's a definable internet, there's companies like Amazon and Google and all of these exactly how these guys have predicted for years and years happening. Once those people are in power, once people like Jeff Bezos are seen as the richest technocrat in the world in 1999 and on the front cover of Time magazine, that was a time where they said, okay, Edge Foundation, let's do something. Let's get the best, most elite scientists here to have those controversial conversations that we're not even allowed to have in private. And we'll get these guys who everybody trusts to have those conversations in public and just normalize it. Just normalize the idea of having these conversations. And some of these conversations are wild. Some of the thought experiments they use are wild.
Okay, so wait a minute now, Johnny. These are not conversations. These are bringing people to an event center, a conference center, wining and dining them, letting them meet all sorts of people like themselves, as well as top scientists, and then training them in subjects that would be too far out for you to be able to talk about in polite company.
Yeah.
So,
you really, really shocking things. What Edge was really created to do. I've researched masterclass after masterclass. So you have masterclasses, they have seminars, they have talks, they have conferences, they have.
Right, and these are not open conferences. This is only for people who are invited. Right.
Yes,
and
the elite,
free.
and
It's free. If you're invited, they will wine you and dine you and give you a lovely place to stay, all for free, because they are training you to be somebody they can use.
Is Jeffrey Epstein is hanging around in the background while Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Salah Kamanga, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, all of the big boys are sitting around the table deciding on how our future looks and how our world is going to be.
And these guys at the time are in their 20s and 30s. Right.
Yeah,
and Epstein is in his 40s.
Not only at the time, growing constantly next to each, because these guys are in it for 20 years. You know, some of these guys are in it for the entire length of it. So even after they know everything that Epstein's done, even after all of that, they still are on board because they're on board. I mean, they've been put into their position, and it is really a CIA training course. It's a CIA training course for the elite scientists to make sure that America stays at the head of something. And it studies three main things, really: how to change people's behavior by using psychiatry, psychology in general, how to change people's
genetics,
everything.
Yes.
Everything about your body. Right. Everything physiologically speaking, they are looking at how to change it to a point when they will reprogram your genes as though it's a computer. And that's Edge Synthetic Genomics Masterclass of 2009, right. Which of course was held.
New world, right. We want to be able to create people of the kind we want, whether it's warriors, whether it's slaves, whatever. We want to know how to do that.
They want to change your mind. They want to change your body. And then they want to also understand what the future world looks like for obvious reasons, and a lot of it is the elite scientists who are going to work for the companies that will be developing this or this technology. They're the ones who are going to be advising the creators of this world, while they're also imagining it on behalf of the most infamous child trafficking money man in history. It is just totally wild, the conversations they have. What they're having is conversations about our extinction, about how to make us extinct, how to destroy human full stop and create something else, which in the synthetic genomic course they called human 2.0. And that was the only video that they didn't put up, and the only audio that they didn't put up on the site, because it was so controversial. The rest of that course has parts that make you realize that these are the enemy. Everything we heard during the pandemic, all of the everything from the way to change our behavior at scale, to ways to shame us at scale, and the way to affect our biology at scale, are all things that they had been planning for years and years through organizations like the Edge Foundation, and has now come into fruition. Me and Tim Hinchliffe were talking about human hackability, hackable humans, and how the infrastructure for that is now being implemented into the environment. The laws are being written, they're accepting that this is what's going to happen, and everything is going forward. That we can see all the planning of that for the past 20 years. If you watch all the Edge seminars, if you read all of the transcripts, they've been planning it openly. They've been publishing it online, and
Yes.
the press don't report it. The people don't report it to talk about it. Everybody knows. If I talk about this stuff in any pub, bar, restaurant, soon everybody starts turning their eyeballs up into their head
Right.
and
Okay, it's
saying,
terrible
"What a
conspiracy
madman!"
theory. But
While
okay,
at the same time, they'll also admit that everything I say is true.
okay. Now we're getting to the end. The intelligence agencies need plausible deniability. Somehow, by the time he's in his 40s or even 30s, Jeffrey Epstein has become enormously wealthy. Now, some of that was probably the Tower Financial Ponzi scheme that he was involved with, or he probably made hundreds of millions of dollars. But here's Jeffrey Epstein paying. What you forgot to say is he was paying for these edge classes. He was paying the costs of this training. Now, Jeffrey Epstein only cared about money and power, so he's not going to be doing favors for people. Somebody, there was some sort of give and take. Jeffrey Epstein was getting something, or it was
At least
somebody else's money. It was family.
$648,000 over the time that they admitted to, but there's so much more that he was giving behind the
Right.
scenes.
So he's paying for this, but he's not. Doesn't do anything out of the goodness of his heart because he doesn't have any goodness in his heart. So we don't really understand who was behind it, who was getting Jeffrey to sponsor this. And at that time, he was still an unknown quantity. He hadn't been charged with any crimes. He was just a rich man about town who liked science, and was good at math and finance, supposedly. And he probably
Yep.
was. So okay, we've sort of skipped his 30s and 40s. And then suddenly he is flying the president of the United States. As soon as Bill Clinton is finished being president, Jeffrey Epstein is flying him to Africa, and Jeffrey Epstein finally is being noticed by the media, and people are saying, "Who the hell is this guy? Where did his money come from?" etc. We might have to fill in those pieces next time. Anything you want to say now, just to sum up?
Just to say quickly, if you actually look at what he was doing in Africa and Asia with Clinton, it was all business meetings. It was the CIA doing business. That's simply it. They were meeting with everybody from Ron Burkle to presidents to politicians. It was all business. I would say that what we learn whenever we look at any part of Epstein's operation is that there's a massive web that we haven't explored. Every time we touch one thing, we think we understand it a bit. We look at it closer and we realize there's a lot more moving parts. So this story doesn't really ever end because we don't know what it looks like fully. So be prepared for many more twists and turns around the corner.
Okay, great. Tell me when you're ready for some more twists and turns.
Okay, I love it. Thank you.
All right. All right. Thank you very much, Johnny.
Thank you.
The power we have is the truth.
This is the nation's leading conference.
It's so empowering to be joining together and working for our children.
Coming to CHD was the best decision that I've made probably all year.
It is a new day when senators and representatives want to associate themselves with Children's Health Defense. Why? We're telling the truth, and they know that. And because people are listening to us, and they know that.
To me, health on a political level is the most important subject. We need to raise a healthy generation.
We, the people, are waking up. We are taking back the system.
The federal government's job is not to ensure the stable legal risk for vaccine manufacturers.
Remember, we're a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. I can't say it any better.
We can live to see a better day where people will be healthier and where government and corporations will be forced to be more responsible.
You can't be a decent human being and know what we have now come to learn and turn your back on it and close your eyes.
My name is Kim Gordon.
And what's your name?
Ian.
How old are you, Ian?
24.
24, fantastic. Yeah. And what's your name?
Glenn Gordon.
Glenn Gordon. And what's your name?
Scott Gordon. I'm 26 years old.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so who's going to tell this story? I've got a feeling it's you.
Yes. I can tell you that both of the boys were born healthy, and then they got their MMR shots at 15 months.
Did they have anything before that?
Yeah, they had a few shots before that. It was a long time ago, so I don't remember exactly.
But they seemed okay before.
Yeah, they seemed okay before. And then they had the MMR shots at 15 months. And within days, both of them descended into autism. Scott ran around banging his head and screaming like he was in pain. He might have had a migraine and couldn't tell us. And Ian was doing a lot of this, and hand flapping, and both of the boys were speech delayed. And when it happened with Scott, I called our pediatrician to report the changes in his behavior, because up until then he had been a happy, healthy baby. And I was told, oh, it's early onset of the terrible twos. No, it wasn't. It was the onset of autism, only the doctor didn't recognize it at the time, because at that time they weren't looking for it. This was back in 1998, just at the beginning of the pandemic. And when it was time for him to get his MMR shots at 15 months, just information had just started to come out about a possible connection between the MMR and autism. And at that time, I couldn't research it myself because we didn't have a computer in the house. And who's going to go sit in the library and do research all day when you have two babies at home? And half the information that's out there now wasn't out there then. So I thought, okay, I'll bring this up when we go to the pediatrician's office. They should be up on these things. So I did, and I was told that there was no scientific connection between the MMR vaccine and autism, and that I really should vaccinate because the complications of measles can be very serious. So I gave consent for him to be vaccinated, and within days he descended into autism. And it's been an uphill battle ever since. It was very difficult to even get an accurate diagnosis. Scott was misdiagnosed with ADHD. We had to take him to another doctor who was finally able to diagnose both of the boys with autism at the same time. He was diagnosed at age 5 and he was diagnosed at age 3. They were both diagnosed at the same visit. And we were able to get early interventions because even before they had their diagnosis, they were classified as preschoolers with disabilities. That was the classification that the school districts could give so that we could start to get early interventions. But then once they got an official diagnosis, it made it easier to fine-tune those services. But you have to fight for the services. I feel like sometimes like I need a football helmet and a sword and shield to get through all the people that I need to get through to get these two services. And we are still struggling to get services. Ian should have a day program, and he should have community HAB services in the home and respite services. He should be in an adult level group home. But right now, we keep getting told that there are no openings anywhere, and so we have been doing the very best we can to provide a structured routine at home. He's in the Spellers program, and he's doing very well in
Nice.
that.
Good.
And he's also been to various programs like Fantastic Friends, and he's done well in those art classes there. And Scott is now working full-time.
Where do you work, Scott?
I work at Wester. That's the name of the dealership. The store that I'm at is Wester Nissan Infinity. Last month I just celebrated my 8th anniversary with the company recently. I am currently working on getting my GED diploma, and then after that we'll be going to ECC for automotive mechanics.
Community college for auto tech.
Yeah.
Right. Now, what do you do at the lot?
I am in charge of running the entire car lot at Wester, responsible for all vehicles used, certified, pre-owned, and brand new.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I
Good for you.
do want to also mention, because I had suspected, because I've been trying to figure out how this happened here. I had suspected, and that's when I read one of the books from Children's Health Defense, the DTaP vaccine has mercury in it. So it was in 2008 I got it, and then I think 2009 this happened.
What happened?
Takes us out.
Your eye turned in?
Eye turned in.
Yeah.
So you think that was some DTaP?
I suspect it.
And you read Children's Health Defense, do you? Our emails? Or
yeah,
the books?
as well as the books.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
good.
suspected it, and then I started hearing information from other sites in the Vaccine Information Center about a little girl, I think, who got that one or another one, and the same thing happened.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, I could talk to you for ages.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. So, what is a day-to-day like now? We know what your day's like. What's his day like?
Well, Ian, we'll get up in the morning and I'll make breakfast for him. He likes his oatmeal with blueberries and maple syrup, and maybe have some sausage or something with it. And then of course Kim, she handles she gives him a lot of supplements which are helping to improve his gut function and his the whole gut brain connection. So there's supplements to help him recover. He has recovered quite a bit, and then of course I'll help him get showered and get dressed and that, and then he's very helpful around the house, and he'll do laundry, take it down, put it in the machine, and he'll help vacuum and clean the house. He likes to cook. Like if one of us is making dinner, say, well, Ian, you need to peel carrots and potatoes, right, guy? Yeah.
That's very helpful.
And he likes to help cook, so maybe someday he'll be in some kind of situation where he's helping out with assisting the chef or something like that. So we like to get him into a vocational program where he can do all these things. He loves to do artwork. Unfortunately, well, he likes to do it on the walls too, but mostly it's confined to his room. And in the basement, we have some interesting artwork on the floor and on the walls, which are just recently painted. and I said if he could reach the ceiling, he might be like Michelangelo, but he's doing well though, right, Ian?
Yeah,
you think your brain is waking up?
Yeah, my brain is waking
up. What do you like to do? What's your favourite thing to do?
Yeah, what's my favourite thing to do? I know. My favourite thing to do is cook hot dogs.
Oh,
you like hot dog? You like doing pasta too?
Pasta, yeah.
Like noodles.
Noodles, yeah.
Noodles with kraut.
Noodles and kraut.
Sausage. Yeah.
Sausage, yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it is a joy to have in the kitchen. It cuts my workload in half because he can pick up that frying pan if something needs to be poured out of the frying pan and into a casserole dish. He can pick that up with one hand and it's not a problem. If I did it, I would stand there and spoon it out a little bit at a time because, it's good to have some muscle in the kitchen. And then also draining soup or anything out of the crock pot. He can pick up that great big pot full of soup and dump it into the colander, and it's very easy for him. It's not a problem. So, yeah, Ian has been doing quite well. We recently switched. We adjusted some of his medications, and so he's very calm.
Yeah.
Ian has had a history of violent and destructive behaviors, and then after it's all over, he gets upset.
Right.
And I can't imagine how he must feel during some of those things, and it's
situations where the police have to be called.
Yeah, it's been very difficult and dangerous.
But you've been
for
doing
us.
great lately.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're very good. You're a wonderful family.
Thank you.
Yeah, you really are. You really are. What advice do you give to the young who are starting out having children? What would you say to them?
I would say that if I had a chance to turn back the clock, I would have canceled their 15-month MMR appointments and never even given it another thought. And I would love to do that just to see how things would have turned out. I often think about that because had I not taken them to those appointments, they could have continued to be healthy and they could have had normal lives, and so could we. Our story would be very different had I canceled those appointments.
Well, I think your son's also right here when he's done the research at Children's Health Defence, and it's not just the MMR, is it?
Not just MMR, they mean that DTaP was responsible for damaging this side. This other one's good, but this one is damaged, so I see double a little bit.
I'm sorry about
that. It doesn't stop me from doing my job or from driving, which it's a blessing because it could have been worse.
That's correct.
But all I have to say is, apparently I've completely and permanently lost confidence and trust in the vaccine and flu shot industry, our regulatory health agencies, and the entire pharmaceutical industry. The vaccines and flu shots are not as safe and effective as we all thought they would be.
Amen to that.
So,
oh yes.
Yep.
Oh, I could sit here and talk to you all for absolutely ever. You really are a wonderful family.
Thank you.
Yeah, really, truly. Okay, well, thank you for all telling your story. We're really proud of you boys. Doing super well.
Lucy, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, we'll be back soon. Oh.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.